Hey there everybody, Sage Popham here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, and in this week's episode of the blog, I'm going to be talking about a really big issue for us as herbalists, and that is kind of talking about some of the things in regards to legalities and certification. So this is one of the big things that freaks a lot of people out when they're wanting to become a practicing herbalist, right? And again, to me, a practicing herbalist is really just anyone that's helping anyone with plants, right? Whether that's for your family, your friends, your community, or whether that's, you're working in a clinical practice. To me, all of those really are what I think of as a practicing herbalist. So there's kind of a lot of different scales of that. But one of the biggest obstacles that people face on the path to becoming a practicing herbalist is basically a fear of getting sued, right? As herbalists, we tread this fine line where we're healing people, right? We're helping people with plants. We're providing a service that is alleviating the suffering in their bodies and helping them with their health. And there's a big fear, especially here in the United States, where people have a fear of getting sued for practicing medicine without a license, right? And so I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. It's a big area. It's a kind of an uncomfortable subject to talk about for a lot of us, but I just want to hit it and tackle this because this is a real big obstacle that we all face. So first and foremost, the legalities around practicing herbalism is going to really differ from country to country. So no matter where you're at in the world, the first thing is it's good to just look into this, right, and research this. Like, I know there's some countries where, you have to have, there actually is licensure for being a clinical herbalist. Here in the United States, we don't have that, right? That herbalists are kind of in this gray area where there is no government regulation for clinical herbalists, right? Generally speaking, if people want to be practicing, like officially practicing medicine, right? You have to go and get an acupuncture degree or a naturopathic degree or even a medical doctor degree. And then you're totally good, right? You have a license to practice medicine. Most herbalists, though, don't want to follow that path or don't, that's not part of their calling. They just want to be an herbalist. And I just want to say, first off, that you're still able to do that, right? That whether you have a license to practice medicine, you can still totally be a clinical herbalist, right? I know a lot of clinical herbalists that have practices, right? They got an office, they got a receptionist, they got a dispensary, right? They're set up to be a practicing herbalist, right? So you can still do this. There's just a specific way that you have to approach how you work with people, right? And a lot of this actually boils down to your languaging, right? So the two big ones that you have to always make sure that you don't use these words, right, is diagnosing and prescribing and treating, 3 words, right? So we as herbalists, we never diagnose disease, we never treat disease, and we never prescribe herbal medicines. Now, it's kind of funny to hear myself saying that because from my perspective, to be totally transparent, that's what we do. But the way that you communicate to your clients, right, not patients, but to your clients, is that you never do those things, right? You simply holistically assess and evaluate someone's body, that you make suggestions and recommendations in regards to their lifestyle, their diet, and some possible herbal recommendations that they can incorporate into their healthy diet and lifestyle, right? We never prescribe, we never diagnose, we never treat, right? Those are really the big things that you have to make sure that you're communicating in your work with people, in your clinic or in your practice, in your marketing, if you're marketing yourself or whatever, right? So those are the big ones. The other side of this is that, there is no licensure for practicing herbalists in the United States, right? And so there's kind of two sides of that leaf, right? On the one hand, it's great, right? Because we don't have a big governmental body, looking down over us, telling us how to practice herbalism, right? And this is really something that happens with a lot of conventional doctors, is they're like, yeah, it actually kind of sucks because the insurance companies determine how we practice medicine, right? They tell you what we can do, what we can't do, etc., right? So that's kind of the beauty of us not having licensure, is that we can basically do whatever it is that we need to do, as long as we're kind of following those communication protocols I just laid out. The other side of that is that because there's no licensure, this freaks a lot of people out, right? It freaks a lot of people out, and there is no, just to clarify this, there is no stamp of approval, there is no certificate, there is nothing that exists that says you are now ready to become a practicing herbalist, right? There's nothing like that exists. The closest thing that we have in North America is the American Herbalist Guild. Now, AHG has what they call an RH, or a Registered Herbalist. And in order to get to become an RH, a Registered Herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild, there's very specific requirements that you have to meet. You have to take certain tests. You have to show that you have the competence to see clients. There's also specific requirements that you have to meet in terms of showing that you've mentored or studied with another registered herbalist with the American Herbalist Guild, that you've seen a certain number of clients, had a certain number of clinical hours, just to make sure that you know what you're doing, right? So the American Herbalist Guild really, for the most part, offers the most what we might consider legitimate or kind of recognized certification that we can get as herbalists in North America. Now, that being said, there's lots of clinical herbalists that are not registered herbalists with the American Herbalist Guild. I highly recommend checking out their website, reading through. They've got a lot of information on there about some of these logistics and legalities of being a practicing herbalist. Now, that kind of brings up this whole thing around certification, right? Because this is a question that I get a lot, is, what kind of certification do I need in order to be a practicing herbalist? And like I said, there really is none aside from American Herbalist Guild. But, there's kind of this thing that I've noticed in regards to certification, that it's kind of there's kind of two sides of it. There's positives and negatives to these things, right? So on the one hand, we kind of have this dynamic where people feel like they need to have a piece of paper that will kind of authorize them to do the work that ultimately is their heart's calling. And, I think that can be a good thing, but I think it can also instill potentially a false confidence in oneself, right? Take, for example, if someone goes to, a weekend workshop and they get a certificate saying that now you're a certified master herbalist, and they just did a weekend workshop, right? That's not nearly enough training to be a master herbalist or to start seeing clients. But now they've got this piece of paper and they're like, well, I'm certified, I'm legit now, I can start doing this. And they honestly probably don't have the competence to really do that, right? And so there's part of me feels like certification in that from that perspective can actually be kind of dangerous, right? Because it might externally instill a sense of confidence when people don't actually have the competence to do that work and to be working with clients, right? So to me, a lot of people ask me like, Seja, how do I know when I'm ready to start working with people? Like, how do I know I've reached that level of the practicing herbalist, right? And to me, there's something around a feeling, like there's something in our heart, there's something about our connection to the plants and to nature that just tells you you're ready, right? That you've really done your research, you've done your studies, you've had your experience, you've really done your homework, right? That you know your remedies, you know your formulations, that you've healed yourself through the plants, that you yourself have been healed and transformed by the medicinal touch of nature through these plants, and you've done your own work to the point where you feel like you're ready to share that healing with other people. To me, that's the most important certification that one can get, right? Is kind of being authorized by the plants themselves, right? That there's a feeling inside of us of, oh, I'm ready to do this. Like, I'm ready to share this with people, that I feel like I really know what I'm doing, and I feel confident in myself to put myself out there to be of service to my community in a bigger way, right? And there's actually a part in my book where I say, that, the herbalist isn't certified by any university or degree or certification or piece of paper, but our certification is inscribed by the hand of nature herself, that there's something inside of us that just knows that we're ready. And sometimes this unfolds very organically too, right? It's like the more you're working on yourself, healing yourself, reaching new levels of health and vitality, and you're doing your studies and your experience, and you're really learning, you're expanding your knowledge, and people are going to start recognizing that. People are going to be like, wow, like this person really knows their stuff. And then organically, someone will reach out to you and say, hey, I've got this problem. Do you think you could help me out, right? And there's your first client, right? And you help them out, and you provide them with that healing, and then they get better, and then they tell their friends, and then all of a sudden your phone rings and someone else is like, hey, I heard you helped this person out. I kind of got this thing going on that, I kind of really don't know how to help myself with it. Can you give me a hand? And there's your second client, and it just grows from there. And, I think there's this dynamic that I see a lot where, sometimes people, they don't feel ready to start helping people. They're like, no, I got to do another workshop or another program or another conference, or I got to read this other book first, or I got to get all my notes together, or I don't know enough, but they've been studying herbal medicine for like 20 years, right? And they really know their stuff. And there's this sense that at that point it's not a competence issue, it's a confidence issue. And there's kind of there's an internal process that we have to go through as herbalists to get to that level of helping people. And, it's like, that's why I always say, that's why they call it a practicing herbalist, or, even with doctors, they say they're practicing medicine, right? Practicing, not expert, not knows it all, not master, but practicing, right? And not perfect too, right? It's like, so if we think of that from that orientation, that sometimes that next level of education for how to help people is to start helping people, right? That the only way you're going to learn how to help people with medicinal plants is to just start helping people with medicinal plants. But I think it's very important that before we do that, we make sure that we have the competence, the know-how, the skills, the strategies, the principles, the practices to actually do that in a good way. And while there are certain organizations and schools that provide the training for you to do that, and do provide what I consider legit, good, solid education and certification that goes alongside of it, I think it's really important that we don't get too stuck on this need to have a piece of paper to authorize us to do that, but to really make sure that there's that internal calling and that internal drive to do so, right? So I hope no one's taking this the wrong way. I'm not trying to put any, I'm not trying to put down herbal certification or, say you don't need that. I'm just saying I think there's a deeper level to it. And, just to get back to this discussion on legalities, the reality of the situation is that it's incredibly, incredibly rare for someone to get sued for practicing medicine without a license. I remember I was at an herb conference a number of years ago, and I was talking to this with Amanda McQuaid Crawford. She's an amazing clinical herbalist out of Los Angeles. She's been doing it for a very long time. She really knows her stuff. And she's a badass practitioner, right? She's got a whole clinic and dispensary, and she's helping a lot of people, right? And I was talking to her about it, and she was like, yeah, it's super rare. Like, I can literally count probably on one hand how many people over the last number of decades have actually gotten sued for practicing medicine without a license. It's incredibly rare, right? You just have to be careful, right? You have to watch what you say. You can't be messing around with people's drugs. You gotta be, just using those remedies that are safe, gentle, effective, but you're not giving people like digitalis or henbane or lily of the valley or tablespoon doses of poke root, where you might actually hurt someone with those plants, right? It's like, but if you're using herbs like yarrow and calendula and peppermint and chamomile and valerian and cramp bark and all these herbs, we've got literally hundreds of plants that we can choose from that don't interact with drugs, that are very, very safe for people to use, and the likelihood of you harming someone is very, very low. And I actually did, last week's blog episode was on that subject, so be sure to check out that video from last week. I was sharing about kind of how to use herbs that heal and don't harm, and kind of this dynamic around how likely is it that you can hurt someone with a plant, right? But from a legal perspective, the chances of you getting sued are super low. It very rarely happens. So I think that's a good thing to consider, right? And I think another important thing to consider is that, there's literally millions of people that are getting harmed by pharmaceutical medications than there are by plants, right? If we think of, it's very rare for a plant to cause a serious side effect in someone. We might see constitutional side effects. They get a little dry or they're a little too hot, and we can work around that, right? We can adjust dosage, we can adjust formulation, we can switch our herbs around to make it more constitutionally suitable. But it's very rare that you're going to give someone an herb or a formula and it's going to create serious side effects like what we see with a lot of prescription medications. And if, I'm not trying to put down prescription drugs. I'm not trying to say they're bad or that they're wrong. I'm just saying when we compare a prescription to an herb, the herbs are significantly more safe, right? And so I think this fear that we can get into as herbalists around hurting people, getting sued, how to approach kind of this logistical factor of helping people. I think we can be a little more out there than we think we can, right? So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity. There's probably a whole lot more that I could share on this subject. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions on this topic. There's a lot of strong emotion around this topic. I'm just trying to share my perspective here, and I hope you're not taking it the wrong way if it's different from your perspective. And I really honor that perspective too, and I in no way ever want to seem like I'm putting anyone down or talking bad about anyone or anything. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity. Hope if it provides a little bit more comfort, in your ability to get out there, out into the world, into your community, and helping people with the plants. I just think now more than ever, the world needs herbalists, right? I mean, we are seeing a culture that is so severely disconnected from the natural world, a culture that is very sick right now, right? We're sick in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirits, and I think a lot of that comes from our disconnection with nature. And herbal medicine is the living, healing intelligence of the earth. And the more that we can be incorporating that living, healing intelligence of the earth into people's lives, the better. And as herbalists, that's our job, right? It's our job to kind of straddle these two worlds. We've got the earth and nature over here, and the world and culture and humanity over here, and we want to be that bridge to bring them together, because I think the cultural sickness that we see on this Mother Earth at this time is because those things have been so separated, because humanity is separate from nature, because a lot of human beings don't think of themselves as a part of nature. A lot of human beings don't think of nature as intelligent, right? And as herbalists, the healing that we provide, I think, can move so much deeper than just alleviating suffering or taking people's symptoms away. That's good, but I think there's a deeper level of reclaiming the human being's rightful place in the natural order of things that herbal medicine can provide. So thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the blog. Once again, if you're watching this or listening to this anywhere but the Evolutionary Herbalism blog, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. We've got a whole bunch of free videos over there, free training, all of our programs. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, be sure to click subscribe so you get updates when we're posting a new episode. And we've also have our podcast called The Plant Path that you can subscribe to on iTunes or Stitcher. If you're subscribed to any of those channels, be sure to leave us a comment, give us a review. We always love the feedback, love to see those reviews come in. And thanks so much for being a part of the world of herbal medicine, and I truly wish you well on your plant path. So until next time, take care and be well.